It may not look like much is happening in a vineyard during winter. The grapes were taken long ago during harvest, and even the fallen leaves have lost their warm autumn hues. But there is still important work to do that is essential to a successful bounty of high-quality grapes. Hello enophiles! One of the best ways to learn about viticulture is by spending a year in a vineyard. Today we will begin that adventure during winter dormancy and follow the journey through a series of videos. During this cold period, we will discuss relevant parts of vine anatomy and a few vine training methods to better understand the important work involved in winter pruning and how it will set up the vineyard for the year to come. So grab your favorite beverage and cheers the like button. Arriving at a vineyard in winter, you are coldly greeted with a muted color palette of grays and browns. Your breath is visible in front of your face, and you pull your scarf tighter around your neck to better protect against the cold. At first glance, nothing seems to stick out. The vines are just tangles of sticks reaching towards the heavens. This is called winter dormancy. This isn't the way it is everywhere in the world. Close to the equator, temperatures don't drop low enough to trigger this stage in the vine's life cycle. The vines in these places produce fruit year-round. Unfortunately, this bountiful fruit does not make good wine. This is why there isn't fine wine production close to the equator. So here you are, clutching a thermos of coffee like a lifeline instead of sipping a Mai Tai in a warm tropical vineyard. Stepping closer and inspecting one of the vines, you notice that the once limber and green shoots have lignified, turning hard, gray, and wooden. These are now called canes. Much like your thick winter coat, this helps protect these canes from all but the worst that winter can do. This is important because all along each cane, at regular intervals, are buds. These small structures contain the embryos for all the leaves, tendrils, and flowers that will emerge as the bud grows into a shoot in spring. Over time, as the cane continues to lignify, it will provide an increasingly sturdy structure for next year's shoots that will emerge from the buds, boosting them to grow even further outwards and higher upwards, potentially expanding the territory that this vine can conquer year by year. If resources are abundant and the vine is allowed, it will grow to extreme sizes. The winemaker does not share the same goals as the vine. In most situations, the winemaker has an eye on increasing fruit quality, and there is a delicate balance between the quantity of fruit produced and the quality of that fruit. This balance isn't as simple as a direct inverse correlation where the quality climbs at the same rate the fruit quantity drops. It more closely follows a curve where at some point there are diminishing returns in quality compared to the smaller amounts of fruit. The ideal amount of fruit is unique based on the land and environment the vine grows in, the variety of vine planted, and the winemaker's goals. All of this is to say that the winemaker has a goal in mind for the quantity of fruit that the vine should produce, and the vine has likely set itself up to produce considerably more than that. This means the winemaker must prune the vines, removing some canes completely and cutting others back to leave behind the optimal number of buds for the coming year's growth. Pruning is equal parts art and science, and the pruning method depends on the way the vines have been trained. To understand this a bit better, let's look at a little vine anatomy, vine training methods, and pruning methods. Coming out of the ground is the trunk. This grows thicker every year, creating an increasingly sturdy base that supports the shoots and keeps the vine off the ground. It is also the highway for water, nutrients, sugars, and carbohydrates to travel to and from the roots. Most winemakers will train their vines to optimize fruit ripeness and increase protection against disease pressures and more. There are many ways that vines can be trained, each with their own benefits and drawbacks. Some of these methods are truly elaborate, such as training a vine to go up a pergola and out quite a distance, or dense low-laying nests that can withstand high winds in parts of Greece that numerous other plants cannot. This versatility is due to the vine's nature as a climber. In the wild, it evolved to climb up a multitude of plants, forced to adapt to the unique height, width, and shape of each one, eventually climbing high enough to break out of the shadows and flourish. Winemakers use this malleability to their advantage, employing stakes, posts, ties, and wires to fashion young vines into a multitude of shapes, or vine training methods to fit their needs best. Vine training methods describe the way that vines are shaped. Each of these methods is pruned only one of two ways in winter, cane pruned or spur pruned. Two training methods can even look very similar to the untrained eye and differ based on the pruning method, resulting in big differences throughout the year. Looking around this vineyard, we are unlikely to find all the vine training methods. In fact, it seems like all the vines here have two thick arms coming out at 90-degree angles from the trunk, forming a T-shape. These arms are permanent wood and function very much like the trunk. This vine training method is known as double cordon. If the vine had only one arm, it would be called single cordon. This method uses spur pruning. Single and double cordon vines may look similar to another training method called single or double Guyot, but those are cane pruned, and we will discuss those in a bit. All along the thick wooden arms of the double cordon trained vines at regular intervals are gnarled-looking spurs. Each spur has anywhere from 2 to 10 canes, though the higher end is extremely unusual. Part of the winter pruning here can be done mechanically or with less skilled and therefore cheaper labor. This simply involves trimming much of the top of each cane and removing it from the wires. At this stage, it is not necessary to make the much more important decisions of winter pruning that require great training and therefore great cost. The cut parts of the canes that are wrestled off the trellis can be simply discarded between the rows of vines to be cleaned up later or mulched with a machine. Getting this work done earlier in the season gives the winemaker a decent amount of time before they need to do the final steps of winter pruning. To complete winter pruning, a second pass is required, involving greater knowledge and experience. At each spur, one of the 2 to 10 canes is chosen, and all the other ones at that spur are cut all the way back. The remaining cane is cut down to the point where it has 2 to 10 spurs on it. In spring, each of these will grow into shoots with leaves, tendrils, and then flowers, once again causing the spur to have 2 to 10 shoots on it, similar to how we found it. This pruning method might sound exhausting, but since part of it can be mechanized or carried out by cheaper labor, it is actually the least time-consuming and least costly pruning method of the two. There are additional benefits unrelated to time, money, and skill. The buds that are left are very close to the thick wood of the spur, offering better protection during winter. It is also much easier to produce a larger crop with this method. Once again, there are many ways to train a vine, and each employs one of the two pruning methods. If we look at double Guyot vines, which similarly form T-shapes but use cane pruning, we can better understand the differences. Instead of two thick arms made of permanent wood, there are two horizontal canes that are just 1 year older than the canes growing directly out of them. No spurs are growing from these vines. Each horizontal cane will be replaced with one of the canes growing out of them. During winter pruning, the winemaker will select one of the vertical canes and cut back the other canes. This cane is trimmed down so that it contains the desired number of buds on it. Then it is carefully and painstakingly bent back and tied down to the wire. Next year, it will be replaced by one of the shoots that will grow out of it, just like it replaced the cane it grew out of. This process of selecting, pruning, and then tying down requires lots of time and expertise. It isn't all negative, and there are advantages, including the fact that the buds that remain are much farther from older wood that may contain disease, as well as this method is better suited to producing smaller yields of fruit. Now that the trellises have been cleared of the canes tangled in them, it is a great time to repair any trellises that require it. By the time all the pruning and repairs are done, the ground might have warmed enough to plant new vines. It may surprise you to find out that the vines being replaced are not even 40 years old. At around 35 years old, fruit production begins to diminish in grapevines. The subsequent increase in quality is minuscule and not worth the drop in quantity for most winemakers, so vines are pulled and replaced. The young vines are shaped over the next few years into the desired training methods. The vine does produce fruit during this time, but it is not used for wine since the roots haven't been properly established and the fruit isn't high quality. It is pretty clear now that while the vines have tucked themselves in for winter dormancy, there is still plenty of work that needs to be done. This work isn't just cleaning up the end of the current season, it is very focused on setting up for a successful future. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon so you don't miss a single video. Thanks for watching and see you next week.